And now it's time for our first panel session. As we're all aware, the digitisation era started in about 2010, but many have aborted their initiatives as they have very few differences with the automation era, which happened prior to 2010. The key difference in these initiatives is that the word digital is involved in there. And mostly these are outsourced to external IT vendors that claim their products and solutions are digitally ready, such as supporting all the coolest technology like RPA, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And most organizations are not ready, but they are forced to be ready for digitization, particularly with the current pandemic situation forcing people online. So I'd like to welcome our panelists now, and with our first question, in your experience, what is the current outlook of digital transformation and automation, and could these initiatives be aborted again after the pandemic situation calms down? Because there's a lot of take-up right now. Could these be lost or removed once things calm down and we go back to a more physical world? So I'd like to pass this over to Jae Lee from WorldRoamer first. What is the outlook for you?
Thank you, Stuart. So I believe maximizing sustainability is crucial for any company going through these unprecedented times. And applying process automation is one initiative to drive digital transformation. And conducting assessments on the current business SOP and workflows would be an ideal first step towards this topic, as digital transformation is quite an important issue. It's also important to remind ourselves that process automation doesn't have to be always an automated process. For example, for a cloud-native company like us, WorldRoamer, we focus on automating two key aspects of our work, which are business operation and product development workflow, and finding areas where we can reduce the lead time in communication, and also reducing the resolution time for product delivery are some of the examples and few attributes that we focus on improving as part of our process automation. And these benefits through these process automation will surface and become even more apparent, even more so post-COVID.
Yes, how about Aik-Phong? You have some thought to share?
Sure. So I think what's kind of funny was when Nelson of NTU was sharing the slide about COVID-19 as one of the CIO, CTOs, that's making one of the biggest changes. I think it's really true. And kind of like I was reading this article from UBS, research from the Chief Investment Office just a few days ago. So it says that there are really three things that's the key trends because of COVID, right, and post-COVID. One is that countries, companies, and individuals are going to be more indebted. Two is that we're going to be a place where we're going to be less global and more regional, right? So global supply chains are going to be more within a certain particular zone versus across a lot of countries, right? So as we know, because of supply chains, they are now like being disrupted tremendously. So getting like 20 suppliers from 18 other countries is going to be quite tough if one breaks, right? So I think there's going to be less global. And then third is more pertinent to what our discussion is today, is that UBS is that we're going to be more digital, right? I think it's kind of like a given. So I think that is totally true. So, and I think if you ask me, the outlook is going to be really positive in that regard. And I think one of the reasons is because really there is no choice, right? So you're forced to, right, by regulation, or because your revenue drops, right, until it becomes zero, right, or a factor of its or fraction of its own self, right? So maybe I kind of like Stuart just shared the screen. By the way, Stuart, I think Aaron is having problems with his mic, right? You might want to try to unmute him if possible. So yeah, so if you can take a look, and Fave, we are operating in 3 countries. So some of you guys may have missed out the introduction. We bought over Groupon's business in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia in the last like 3-4 years, and we service about 30,000-40,000 merchants, right, across different sectors, right, from retail to travel to F&B, etc. Right, online merchants as well. So if you can see what I have shown is on the screen is this, right? One merchant in the same industry, right, in the same location in Singapore. And when I say post-COVID, it's essentially right now, right, where the CB is a circuit breaker. Singapore terms it's circuit breaker, so they call it lockdown. And as you can see, same industry, And one merchant on the left, right, I call it like Ace, right? It's growing, right? It dropped to 0 and then it starts to grow, right? And you can see the trend even within a short period of time, like a month, it's almost back to a normal steady state, right? If you kind of looked around the right, call it a Fave merchant there. These are real data. Of course, I obscure the brand, for privacy reasons. So this merchant, after the lockdown, we call it circuit breaker in Singapore, the revenue just dropped to 0, right? So I think this is where how you innovate, how you transform, it's going to be key, right? If not, you might just die. So if you take a look at the first case on the left, so you can imagine once the lockdown is over, this merchant would have a sudden incremental revenue, which is previous BAU, right? Business as usual revenue. So I think that's going to be really cool. So I think one is this, right? Is you need the revenue. And I think secondly is that there's a lot of opportunities for you to increase more business as well as reduce your costs, right? The way you sell products and services, right? Because in Fave, we onboard merchants physically because of Fave Pay, like a cashless payment. That's one of our new products, right? And you need a QR code, right? So we used to do it physically, and that's a lot, right? We sign maybe onboard maybe close to about 1,000 merchants every month, and every place you have to go and stick stickers and stuff like that. And what we've done during this lockdown is that we now digitally onboard our merchants, right, in quick period of time. And now, because of that, our efficiency has increased, right? And our sales productivity has increased as well. So if we used to sign maybe X number of merchants every month, now we've actually done increase maybe about 10 to 20%, right? And the other benefits of digitalization is that now we are reviewing our costs, right? So our office space, we're probably going to half it or not more, because we've been proven that we are able to work very productively without loss of any productivity. In fact, this increase without the physical footprint, right? So I think that's why, right? And our transport clean has reduced as well, right? So I think there is a absolute need, and the trend is going to be there. And I think my one takeaway for everyone on the call is that those who can adapt and thrive in this new environment, and not just adapt and really thrive, right? And work remotely, etc., are going to be the winners, right? So I think the trend is good, yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ike. Yeah, we've seen just yesterday. I read that Twitter they're allowing all employees to work from home from now on, and they can choose to do that, and that could lead to less office space and saving costs there. Just out of interest, Jae, with WorldRoamer, what sorts of things have you done in WorldRoamer during the pandemic to act to it and react to it from a digital transformation point of view? Have you done anything similar to the things that Ike has done?
Sure thing, Stuart. So as I mentioned briefly just before with my response, we're focusing on two key elements of improving our work. One side of thing is the business operation, and the other part is the product development workflow. And reducing time in any aspect, in any kind of environment, I believe is the one of the easiest ways to cut cost. It's common to throw bodies at problems in any organization, and also the reverse as well, to cut down the cost. But it relatively doesn't really solve the real core problem if you are just treating bodies to solve your problems. So time is definitely of the essence, especially during these days. So for us, because of this forced situation where all employees have to work from home and remotely, communication, reducing the time to communicate, and making sure that the notification to each communication endpoints, to each node, is properly processed and being delivered, that seems to be working out very well for us. So in terms of business operation, when a certain deal or a certain sales point or certain processes are triggered, we have a system in place where the relevant people are being alerted to all relevant channels. In terms of product development, which is more common in the tech world or in a cloud company, we make sure that the developer or the product development team is not dependent because another employee has not triggered something. So everybody just needs to focus on their work, the tangible work, and the process in between just fluidly triggers the next flow, as steps will be triggered by the previous step subsequently.
Great, thank you, Jae. And I believe we have Aaron's microphone working now, so let's hop on to the next question. So many organizations aren't ready to move to a digital enterprise, as this causes a cultural shift, as we saw earlier in my interview with Herne. You have to transform the people, the processes, the technology. And there's statistics rolling around that only 30% of businesses succeed in their digital transformation efforts.
Yeah, very interesting from sharing from Jae Lee and Aik-Phong that actually is landing to the next question that we are going to ask. So let me just quote from Gartner. Gartner is the research analyst company. So basically, a few years back, Gartner released a research paper mentioning that digital transformation is a very, of course, daunting task and also very challenging, as it has been mentioned, not only touching the businesses, but the people, process, technology, and almost transforming the entire organization. And of course, one of the takeaway is that Gartner mentioned that enterprise architecture is the gateway for successful digital transformation. So I think just now, even though the word enterprise architecture was not mentioned, but since the beginning of this afternoon, actually all the successful case study and the presentation sharing, actually they have been applying the architecture thinking into transforming their organization to work from home or not in the office. Because what happened is that we need to know the impact, as it has been mentioned by Jae, that we need to know the impact of the changes. We need to know the process prior and after, which one impacted internally and externally. So this is something that I think quite interesting and getting ground in the today COVID-19. Stuart?
Yeah, and Gartner also describes this web of enterprise interdependencies, like inside out, outside in, and that's what we call this digital enterprise map.
So basically, digital enterprise map is something like the GPS. So if you go to the new place that we haven't visited before, or we cannot speak the local language, so typically now it's very, very convenient. We just subscribe to the data, we turn on the GPS, and we ask Google for anything that we want to eat, where we want to go, what places to visit, nearby where you are. So this is something I think we can mimic into our life today, because we are not in the office, and yet we are working in the large organization. There are many departments, there are many people that we whatever decision we do, we impact them. So how do we maybe we want to hear from Jae and Aik-Phong again, how do we so-called practice so-called we are not physically present and yet we are still working collaboratively in the enterprise? Yeah, over to you, Jae.
So ironically, I believe the key ingredient isn't really technical to this problem. I believe transparency is the key element to effectively navigating through various challenges, even more so these days. These complexities may consist of decisions or actual executions themselves, but without transparency and communication, I can assure that it's very likely to cost everybody more time and effort than it was originally anticipated to resolve an issue. So demonstrating a healthy culture, in my book, that champions professionalism through transparency would be the secret sauce which should not be neglected. Transparency can be implemented through proper workflows, setting up project management tools and environment that facilitates transparency, which would only amplify and make it easier for the people involved to onboard to this culture of transparency, will be my opinion.
And Aik-Phong, with the culture and the people in your organization, how do you effectively make that digital transformation work and map that enterprise complexity?
Yeah, and I totally resonate what Jae was mentioning, right? And previously also, I think Thren was mentioning too. So really, first of all, I think it starts from the top, right? And it can be right down to the CEO or your chairman level. And once you start from the top, it's easier and much better. And it's not just starting from the top, it's about continually socializing that to the teams, right? And then second of all is I think culture is going to be really, really key. Now, there's a few things, right? When you talk about change, right? You talk about digitalization. First of all, there's going to be fear in your organization. There's going to be lethargy. I think lethargy is a better word, the kind of nicer word to say than lazy, right? People say, oh no, there's more work on my plate, shit, you know? I have to my BAU plus I have to do additional stuff. You have to talk to external consultants. I have to do double work, you know, to get things going, right? The transition phase, right? So I think I will urge everyone to look at it and change that mindset and address it, right? And I agree with the transparency part totally as well, and make it like show the excitement, show the possibilities, right? Now let me give you an example. So I've been thinking about it, right? Because with COVID and everyone is so into digital right now, so we can do conference call work from home all the time. So actually, you think about this, our workforce can now be totally global, right? So who's to stop Fave from employing someone in Vietnam, right? And we can be working, because in Singapore right now for the past 2 months, I've not seen my colleagues, right? So why can't I hire someone from Vietnam? Or conversely, why can't someone from Silicon Valley hire me to work for them, right? And I can be paid in Bitcoins, for example, right? So I think if you kind of look at it, then you start to think about the excitement and the possibilities to increase revenue and reduce costs, right? And I think that's how you do it. And something else I want to share is that I've also been invited to share in big organizations who have been trying to look at transformation within the organization, and they want to learn from startups, right? So I've been invited to share in McDonald's leadership retreat, Unilever, Estée Lauder, BNP as well, right? So there's a lot of fusing of the startup mindset into agriculture, into large organization, right? And kind of use like agile development methodologies, you know, sprints, test and learn, MVP, etc., right? And maybe with a big but to kind of share with everyone, it's not going to be easy because of your inherent big company challenges. I was mentioning the inertia. You're big. There's compliance issue. And there's, for a lot of existing incumbents, your role is really about risk minimization, right? Versus a startup that is really always hunting for new opportunity, right? So it's almost like a defense versus offense. So it's not easy, right? And this is where I think Jay was talking about transparency. It starts about, you know, communication and culture, and shifting that fear, and then, you know, trying to shift it to become excitement and or possibilities. I think those would be really important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowledge sharing is something that seems to be crucial, and it's great to hear that startups and larger organizations can work together on sharing that knowledge, because you have the startups being quite experimental. And also to your point about employing from abroad and working with time zones, that sort of stuff. I mean, I can relate to that personally because I'm currently in the UK working for W.Media, stuck here because of the pandemic, and you know,
Yep.
we're working through it through a digital transformation.
That's right.
By going through Skype, by working through email, and working through those time zones, and it's flexibility from your people that really can help that move forward. So guys, last question before we move on to some audience questions. In your experience, what digital transformation formulas have and haven't worked for you? What have you experimented with as startups? What have you been able to implement and be experimental with, and what have worked, what hasn't? And what lessons have you learned to create that and realize that execution of the digital transformation strategies? Going back again to that statistic, 30% only succeed in these transformation efforts. So to you, Ike, first, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what is that key to success?
Sure. Yeah, so I think there are three things, if I may share. One is that is the buy-in from the top, right? Maybe kind of share with you some of our history. Maybe about 2 years ago, 2 years ago, in one of our big offsites where we have like 300-400 of us across 3 countries. We gathered together. It was in Penang or Malacca, where Joel, our founder, main founder and CEO of the company, said, "Hey, we're actually helping companies digitize, right? And then, but at the same time, there are processes within us that is not digitalized yet, right? So therefore, it started even before COVID-19. We're lucky to actually have the process, and everything became like, our contracts used to be like half-half on digital contracts. Now, pretty much a lot of it on HelloSign, etc. So it started from there. And I think if you're having external consulting companies, and if they're hired to help you with change, maybe you want to think about payouts based on deliverables would be useful, and throughout execution as well, right? And it's not just a lump sum payment that you pay an external consultant. Two is that you probably want to include a budget. So when we introduced Fave Pay about three years ago, right, into the markets, we actually, when we live that product, we had maybe 3 project managers, right? Because we just couldn't make it stick, right? And we launched it, lived it on a beta mode in Malaysia. We just couldn't get it going, right? And each time we had a new project manager, so, oh no, you're going to be out of the company soon. You're taking a really toxic project, right? So I think when it started to work, when we decided to put in a budget into it, I said, okay, fine, we're going to put X $100,000 into this, including marketing, etc. And then to have KPIs, right? And because when you talk about change and transformation, everyone wants that feedback loop, right? And once you know that you're getting somewhere, and then people who are invested more interest are then going to put in more effort to get the project going, right? And then as they start doing that, they say, hey, you know what? My old way isn't that great anymore, right? I'm seeing that week on week, 1-2% or 5-10% incremental value, right? Is it efficiency with more revenues, etc., right? I can start seeing it, right? I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think having good KPIs are important, and then to feedback that to everyone, right? And then last one is really about communicating the progress, like what Jay was talking about, transparency and communication, same thing. You have to update the progress and impact to the teams, right? And feel free to always iterate it, because you're not going to get it right the first time around. When we launched Fave Pay, we failed for like 5 months, right? 3 months, right? And until we kind of got the formula right, in terms of customer acquisition, merchant acquisition, the value proposition, etc. And so it's not going to be easy. So communication is important, and have the grit to push it through.
I think it's a very interesting insight. What Aik-Phong has mentioned, I think is this is one of the best practices. Actually, I've been involved in the so-called digital transformation and enterprise architecture. So many of the team is that they might have done a good job, but they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to sell and market themselves. So what Aik-Phong has shared, I think, is one of the best practices that many people don't do. So
that's right.
Remember, when you have done the digital transformation, when you got some improvement, you need to do marketing yourself. You need to sell it internally so that you get the buy-in from other people, so that you can continue your transformation. Otherwise, your transformation will be aborted right away. Yeah. So this is a very interesting insight, and of course, we also want to hear from Jae Lee. So what is your take on it?
Right. So I believe I believe the effective digital transformation formula consists of a effective priority as well, or in the order of priority. There's a statement that I like. It goes like people over process over tools, which is a commonly shared statement in an agile methodology. It's because relatively it's easier and tempting to do the exact opposite. Finding a tool to improve your work, then applying the processes to support it, and lastly, taking people into the consideration to fit into the tool and processes. This is more often than not very common practice, which I believe the outcome turns out to be the opposite than what you have expected it to be. So it's crucial to create a culture first, and a healthy culture for that matter, which means a culture that allows effective and efficient communication to run fluidly. And as Aik-Phong mentioned before, it has to come from the top down first, regardless. I mean, it has to come from the bottom up as well, because the ones that are actually creating the culture are starting from the bottom up. It's not just only going to be initiated from the top to down. But once you have a culture in place, getting the buy-ins from the key stakeholders or the top management, it becomes easier, allowing the doors to open for constructive decisions and feedbacks to be shared. The biggest challenge that I also see is building any kind of culture is it has to be shared. A sustainable culture is created through demonstration from both directions. So I think culture is the key word here. And as I stated, it's very tempting to do the very exact opposite, because there are so many tools, good tools out there, and processes and use cases that are already available in the market that we can all learn from, or also even apply as our own. But in reality, the actual execution can only happen when we have the mutual understanding from as a group, as a team, as a company as a whole. So again, I cannot emphasize more how important the culture element to the digital transformation is. Although it's a less technical jargon, being addressed here, but I do believe it has to be that thought process, that mindset, which is the fundamental of digital transformation.